Welcome to the Good Word with Goodwill. I'm your host, Vince Goodwill. We're on Yahoo Sports, part of the Ball Don't Lie Network. Don't forget, on Thursday, we got the No Cap Room podcast that will come out every Thursday. Good Word with Goodwill comes out on Monday. We're on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. This is the first one, so we're going to have some fun. And my first guest is someone that I've known for a long time, someone who's made fun of me for even a longer time. I should say that he's the smartest person doing sports media, but he actually hates being called that. He has Game Theory with Bomani Jones. That's Friday nights on HBO at 11 p.m. and HBO Max. He's the host of The Right Time with Bomani Jones and on the Evening Jones. You can subscribe to them wherever you're listening to this podcast, and there's also YouTube clips of all of these things. Bomani Jones, man, how you doing?
Dude, I'm good. I'll tell you the fun part. You said we gonna have some fun. I can't wait till you start. You out here sounding absolutely like it's your first day at work. Yo, this is the Good Word with Goodwill. Let me make sure I say all these things. It happens to everybody when you first start doing this, right? Like, I can't deviate from the beginning of my show even a little bit. Like, I had to commit it to absolute memory, and it's like pressing a button. Otherwise, you get out there, I hear you there like, oh, I ain't never done this before. Let me make sure. Oh, shout out to the No Cap Room. Okay, cool. Got that.
Check mark, check,
how I introduce
check.
this guy. Yeah. I just see it going right there the whole way. It's all good, baby. It happens to everybody. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, that's why I said at the beginning, Bo. This is the first one.
Yeah, man. Hey, like, lucky for you, you got somebody to say something about it right then and there, so the rest of your listeners ain't got to pretend like they didn't notice.
Hey, well, you know what? The other thing is that I'm going slow. Is my sinuses decide to show up. So I want to make sure that I don't sound nasally on air my first time. Yeah, that's what it is. Plus the first one. You know what I mean? Like, it's the first one. So, well, Bo, you've touched on this stuff before. But I'm very curious as we get into this. The Ja Morant situation, I'm sure everybody knows, the 8-game suspension. He did the interview with Jalen Rose from ESPN a couple of days ago. If you're hearing this Monday, he's not playing on Monday, even though he's eligible to come back. Recalled on the return to conditioning plan that the Memphis Grizzlies called it. Bo, my question, just in general, with what we've heard about Ja, it feels like 8 games, not necessarily from a punitive standpoint, but just 8 games in 2 weeks. Does it feel like, because you were one of the people who said, I'm not sure if he's coming back and playing this year. Does it feel like that part of this is being a bit rushed?
Look, man, that dude said he went and learned some breathing exercises, and he got this all under control. What? Like that was my thing as I was sitting there listening. I was like, you got this all figured out in a week? Teach me your ways, right? like whenever people talk about their problems in the terms that they were using to talk about his problems. So basically all you needed was a week off of work. That was it. And you got to the bottom of everything. But did you really get to the bottom of it, though? And I asked that because the Grizzlies have now decided they're not going to stay in any city after any road games. And I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, this, none of this appears to make sense to me. What are we doing here? So if he's good, I hope that he's good. It just doesn't seem like this something that you fix in the way that they describe fixing it for him. Because, I mean, from what I can tell, the playoffs is pressure. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Pressure. That's what's coming up. Like, if the pressure of whatever it was then was doing it to you, it just seemed like a lot to expect all that to change. That's the part that left me confused. I thought they should have made a long play and just been like, yo, go get yourself right. Because the one thing about them is they can't win in the playoffs without him. I don't know how much they can win in the playoffs with him, but I know this. They win in the regular season without him. Like, they become a different type of team. But
they're winning now in the regular season without him.
Well, the same thing happened last year, didn't it?
Yeah, they were 18-2 without him. I think they won five out of their last 6 recently.
Yeah, and I don't have an explanation for it. Like, I don't watch them closely enough to tell you why they do that. But they could win games in the regular season without him, right? It does feel rushed. But, I mean, they know more than I do, right? Like, I got to lean back on that. Maybe they know something I don't, because this all sounds a little kooky to me.
Well, it sounds like, let's split the baby. let's figure out a way that we can, get you some help while also get you back to this money, while also looking at a wide open Western Conference and saying, Ja, if you get through this, we can actually play until June. Maybe if you get yourself right. And Bo, I don't feel like that's the case.
So the thing about them, and while the West is wide open, right? And I'm going to ask you this. I think you and I, we got some like similar fundamental beliefs about what you got to have to win in the playoffs. And are we really at the point of NBA parity where number 2 option Desmond Bane can be written to the NBA Finals? Like have we gotten there? Because we may have, right? Like, I think that is entirely possible that we are at that point. I'm just not prepared yet for the paradigm to have gotten us to that place where that's what we're going to say. I'm just not there.
That's not the question you need to ask, Bo. The question you need to ask is number 2 option Dillon Brooks?
Oh, come on. Well, there's only one. I guess the problem is I feel like there's only one person who really thinks that he's their number 2 option, but the problem is that person is Dillon Brooks. And thereby he has some measure of agency in moving himself up and down the pecking order and the hierarchy. I mean, look, I'm glad we got Dillon Brooks, man. I don't have that many players left that I don't like, and the NBA's better when I don't dislike him as a person. Right. You know what I'm saying? I just don't like his get down. Him and Grayson Allen, man, they brought Trae Young. Yeah, I now look up and realize I dislike a few more players than I realized.
A couple more villains than you think, Bo. Trae Young is up there. Like I said it when he did the whole bowing at Madison Square Garden during the half COVID year. I was like, we need more villains. But these dudes don't want to lean into that because it goes against the brand. It goes against what they think they should be. Memphis, before they became annoying, I feel like they were like the perfect foils. Yeah. For everybody in the league. They're never the team that you're going to root for, even if you like Ja. Even if you like Dillon Brooks and sort of his Stone Cold Steve Austin ways. Did you see him walking in with the Stone Cold vest with no shirt on? Did you see that, Bo?
Yes, I did. I will say this, though. As we deem this the wide open West, let's just say that they win the West. Mm-hmm. Right. I find this to be a highly unlikely scenario, but let's just say it happens and they win the West. If they win the West, I then have to love them because somehow they managed to be these dudes that honestly do not have the standing to say these things and then became the standing. If they do that, I kind of got to come all the way back around if they do that.
And you have to go to a game in Memphis.
If they make the finals, I'm going to a game in Memphis. I just need to see what that is. I just need to see what that's like. If they make the finals, I am absolutely going to a game in Memphis. No question. I mean, can I direct flight? Like, is that in the cards?
Delta does. I think I took a direct flight to.
Okay. I think I took
a direct flight.
That's something I will admit to you. If it is not a very significant familial event, I am at the point of my journey where I ain't really about these connections. I ain't just hanging out in your little airport.
Well, here's the thing. It doesn't connect. It connects back. It connects through Atlanta. So you go down and then you go back up.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to figure something out.
That's what I'm saying. Look, I don't think we got to worry about that. I don't think we got to worry about Memphis.
I don't think it's going to get that far either. I do not believe that it's going to get that far. It could be cool if it gets that far. But like anybody that feels like they know who's going to win the West, I just want to sit there and just be like, yo, can you give me a really strong why? I mean, I'm down to hear it. I just don't know how anybody could have a passionate opinion about why anybody's going to win the West. Because you can't obviously do that with the Warriors because they're going to have to play at least half their games on the road. And I just can't understand how they're so bad on the road.
Oh, I can see that. And I started monitoring how they play. It's not necessarily, Bo, that there's such a huge difference in winning and losing compared home road. It's the way that they play. It's, we're going to give up a bunch of threes in the first half like they did in Memphis last night. They gave up maybe 12 in the first half on Saturday night. And I was like, okay, let's see how they play in the second half. Second half, Bo, they tightened up. They started attacking the rim. They got Memphis in foul trouble. They did that for about 5 minutes. And then, boom, it went right back to the Jack'em Joe offense. Right back to, we got Steph here. Let's take these 35-footers. And they don't have the tough dudes to take the 35-footers no more. Like, that's why when you said, it's funny, you said there's no path for Memphis to get to the finals. We could have said the same thing about Golden State last year, that there wasn't a path for them to get to the finals, that things had to break right. And I felt like a lot of things broke right for them. Not hating on them, but I feel like a lot of things broke right for them.
Yeah, but let me tell you, boy, there's a big difference between Steph Curry and Ja Morant, no matter what the circumstances are, right? Like, the thing for me with the Warriors last year that's different than this year is, when we really go back and look at it, the only dudes from like when they began winning these championships are Steph, Clay, and Draymond. The rest of these dudes is all new, right? And it's interesting, I think, to look at a team like that where rather than you have like 5, 6 dudes or however many more that have won a championship, and then you bring in a handful of guys and you've got your guys figuring out how to do it a second time and everything that comes with it, and then you just blend these other dudes in, right?
Right.
This squad is all these dudes trying to do it again for the first time with these 3 dudes up top who actually know what to do. And I feel like a bunch of young dudes down there who don't feel like they need to hear nothing from nobody because they already champions. You know, like they like, okay, well, they thought we couldn't win it last year. Well, we're going to come back out here and now we're going to become champions. Like, I don't know if that's exactly how they feel, but it wouldn't surprise me. And if that's what it is, that's a lot to balance and manage, especially when your leader guy is lead by example guy and your leader guy punched somebody in the face before the season started.
Was their season doomed? Was their season doomed when that happened?
I mean, but the thing I feel like me and you have been talking about from the very beginning was, hey, a championship's a championship's a championship, and they don't have to apologize for it. But this was not the 2017 Warriors, right? Like, they weren't walking back in as, the team to beat. Mm-hmm. They were the champion, right? Like, they were in that slot. But it wasn't like, everybody's got to be gunning for Golden State. No, everybody was gunning for each other, as we kind of expected it would be, because last year was so random.
And that's what this year is. Like, you mentioned the point that nobody's afraid of anybody. Nobody's afraid. Nobody fears anyone. There's no playoff matchup that we can look at today and say, you know what, I know how that one is going to go. Like, if you saw Denver and LA in the first round, if you saw Denver and the Lakers, not Denver and the Clippers because they own the Clippers, but if you saw Denver, the 1 seed, by a sizable margin up until this point where they've lost 4 or 5, and you saw the Lakers with a healthy Anthony Davis and presumably a recovered LeBron James, you can say Denver would win the series. Are you confident in a 1-8 situation that is going to be as wide of a margin as we normally call it?
No. See, the thing that would like in that series in particular, the question becomes for every team, can you make Jokic play defense? Right? The Lakers kind of can. And the reason is, in theory, you could say, okay, we put Aaron Gordon on Anthony Davis, except now somebody's got to guard LeBron James. And that somebody's name is not Michael Porter. And it's definitely not Nikola Jokic. Okay. So if you're making Jokic guard, I'm not even looking at it from the standpoint of like he's food. And he's food for some people on some nights, right? This happens, right. But he can be food. But the issue to me is not about whether or not he's food, it's about whether or not he's tired. And so for Denver, to me, to win series and win the championship, the way they play now with Jokic taking 14 shots a game, that's really neat. It's going to have to turn into 20-21 shots a game in the playoffs, right? Like, I think we all feel, that's how these things go. Can you do that if somebody's making them play defense all the time, right? That's where it gets tricky. The thing for me with the Lakers, and they made those adjustments, and they're really cool, but in the end, those are still regular season dudes. Like, they didn't win. They didn't go and get a guy that you're looking at like, they're really going to be able to lean on him in the postseason. They got a bunch of dudes where you're like, they might get in the play-in now.
Right. Well, the thing for the Lakers to me is I've never seen a team do that much turnover that quick and put it together under that much pressure and then say, okay, we're going to win 1 playoff series, 2 playoff series, 3, let alone a play-in game, let alone integrating LeBron, because LeBron ain't played with these new dudes yet.
Right.
That's a whole different thing. D'Angelo Russell has the ball a lot. Anthony Davis is he like superstar Anthony Davis again? If that's the case.
I think he's been a level of Anthony Davis this year that honestly we've never seen. Right? Like, it's the first time that he's had to carry a team that had legitimate expectations. That's never happened before. And you see that, like that game where he got his face bust open and you could just tell everybody was like, nope, don't ask me if he's okay. Make him stand up. Make him stand up. And you see him figure it out. Oh, damn, I guess I got to do that. And this is something else. You and I don't know if you've ever talked about this in a broadcast setting, but them growth spurt dudes are different, man. Like, this isn't a dude who spent his whole life being the best and dominating and carrying that load. One day he was 6'1". The next, like 3 months later, he was 6'11", and everything about his life changed, right? But if you go back in time and look at those growth spurt guys, David Robinson's a great example, one of the greatest players ever. But when it came to that level of, we got to jump on your back to win the big ones, that one never quite worked out for him, right? And there's some other examples you can point to. Marcus Camby was an interesting growth spurt guy, and that comes in with the physical issues too when you start talking about these sorts of dudes. But this is the first time ever it's been on him. Like, this stretch without LeBron, it's been on him. He got to be the one to go do it. And he's learning it in real time. It's kind of interesting.
Well, it's funny. You said the growth spurt dudes. Not only are you not used to being the guy, you're not used to being big. Like, he hit a growth spurt, and then a year later he was at Kentucky. And then a year later he was in New Orleans. Like, big guys develop later than others. I think Olajuwon didn't win his first championship until he was 33, right? Yeah.
But he went to the finals in year 2.
He went to the finals in year 2 with Ralph Sampson, and that was a different made team that he had come in on. He was a full-grown man at 33 in 94 when he went to the finals. And that top of that prime for Olajuwon, that space was maybe, 3 or 4 years?
The peak Olajuwon to me is 92 to 96. Yeah.
You know what I mean? For those who are unfamiliar, it's at the start of it is the good jerseys. On the back end of it, it's the Science Project jerseys.
The Science Project. I mean, the good jerseys weren't even that good, if we go be honest.
They're good compared to the Science Project jerseys. Yeah,
it's do too little greater than do too much. It's one of those scenarios.
So that was my thing with AD was, if this is the best we're going to see of him, and I thought the best we were going to see of him was that bubble year because he had 4 months off and everything else. I didn't think he would get here. If that's the case, how does LeBron fit into this? If Anthony Davis is this guy that is alpha dog, whatever you want to call it, LeBron can't come in and be alpha dog and take that oxygen away from him, right?
Yeah, well, physically, is LeBron even going to be capable of being alpha dog? Like, I think we're making a lot of presumptions about what he's going to be when he comes back. I'm in full-on believe it when I see it mode. Because the way that injury looked, which was, it didn't look that bad, but obviously it's terrible. That's
a sign of getting old, too.
Yeah,
like the bad injuries look worse. The bad injuries don't look so bad, but they turn out to be a month.
And now we about to move into the play every night, catching flights every 3-4 days, then every 2 days, sort of situation. Like, I don't think it is. Obviously, the Lakers are not a team we're talking about going to the finals, right? But if they did get that 1-8 and somehow win it, then they are a team you talk about with the finals because they move up to the 1 line, all that stuff, right? So if they were to go to the finals, and we're talking right now in the middle of March, we're talking about 2.5 more months of basketball. Actually, about 3 more months of basketball. So we're talking about 3 more months of basketball without either LeBron James or Anthony Davis missing a 2 or 3 week stretch of basketball. Do we know the last time that happened? Like, I feel like it's been a while since you've gone 2.5 months without one of them getting hurt for real.
Yeah, it was the bubble.
Yeah. I mean, when's the last, what is it? Is it 60 games that the number that the only year LeBron went over that was the bubble year? It's definitely, he definitely hasn't played 70, but I think he's only played 60 once in that bubble season.
Yeah, because remember, he hurt his hamstring on Christmas Day, his first year.
Yeah.
That was the ragtag Laker year without
It was the groin.
It was the groin, okay. He slipped in Golden State on Christmas.
Yes.
And came back and didn't look right and everything else. Then next year was the bubble year. Then the year after that was the ankle. That was the Solomon Hill, the right ankle sprain where your ankle turns inward.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Ankle sprain.
The high ankle sprain where nobody really comes back from that looking the same. And it took him a whole year, and then this year is this year. Or the past 2 years. It's been a good 3 years since that bubble.
Yeah. Dude, that hamstring injury is a really interesting one to look back on because they were a really interesting team at that point. I want to say they were like 4th and 5th in the West, and they were moving in a trajectory that lets you build an affection for the team because it was really going to be a build up like they had the year with the young guys, and then you make the move for Anthony Davis. But that's right. On top of the injury, there was the whole y'all on watch.
Bro, I was still living in New York.
And then none of them got traded until the end of the year by fault.
No. It was the craziest thing because it was a game in Brooklyn, and I was still living in New York, and LeBron made the comments, and this is no Kyrie, no KD. You just playing Brooklyn, right? The locker room was jovial, and this is a regular season game, guys in New York, whatever, right? LeBron makes the comment. When I say after that game, everybody's face was in their phones, and everybody looked like they had just gotten traded. Like, it looked like a morgue. It was like, LeBron, you have literally destroyed your team like in November or whatever hell the day was. Like, it was literally like a month or two into the season, maybe a little bit later than that. But it was amazing to see how those dudes responded to that and was like, well, if we get Anthony Davis, that means I gotta go.
Yeah, every one of them did. Everybody knew you might make the salaries match.
Hey, Ingram, Kuzma, all of them was like, oh, okay, how come he don't want me? That's what that felt like. Them dudes in there, it was like, man, we Lakers for real now. We got LeBron here. Being a Laker means something. And then after the game, it was like, the air went out of that balloon. We done.
Look,
that's
man,
what that felt like.
Look, all I'm saying is, if my first introduction to NBA life was being on the Lakers, and you tell me I'm about to be a Pelican, oh, dog, are you serious? Like, I thought we was building something here. I thought we was cool. I thought it's a brotherhood. Remember LeBron helping dudes up, saying help your brother up and all that? And then he said, get you up out of here. Yeah, you've been telling us this a long game, but it's not though. But now if he's been shockingly good this year, given age and everything else. I just don't know how much is reasonable to expect him to give you upon coming back. Because no matter when he comes back, because they need these games too bad. Mm-hmm. If he could at all play right now, he would be playing. Like, that's my guess. They don't have the luxury of being like, he's not coming back until he's 100.00%. I don't think they have that. He's not going by the time he comes back, he's probably still not going to be healthy in the way that we would define healthy in most cases. So then what do? I think he can probably fall back. If Anthony Davis proves he can really carry it, I think LeBron can fall back.
That's one of those things I got to believe to see. You got to believe to see LeBron being healthy. I got to believe to see LeBron taking an active step back, him knowing that he's been this good.
I don't know if he'll be physically capable of being that other guy, though. And it comes down to, it might be a better play. If you care what we think, right? And I don't know if he does, but if you care what we think, falling back and being deferential and self-aware about the situation takes you a lot farther than trying to show everybody you still LeBron James, especially if it hurt.
Well, put it like this. Bo, it's been 10 years since LeBron won his last MVP?
Yeah.
And that was the unanimous year. That was the year where he was completing winning 4 out of 5. And the one year he didn't win was the Derrick Rose year. And he was almost unanimous. We're not going to have unanimous MVP this year, I don't think.
No, the game's flipped on that. And I think what is flipped as much as anything else is that Denver, like the two teams in the East have a better record than Denver.
3.
And now, 3, that's right. And now there's an irony to this. I was talking to somebody about this. I ain't going to put their name on it. I don't think they'd mind, but, as much as everybody came down on Kendrick Perkins for what he said, have you noticed a shift in the MVP race discussion since that whole thing happened? It's kind of turned in the other direction. Like, look, I'm still going with Jokic, right?
Right.
I've got my reasons why I picked somebody for MVP, and there's just a set of numbers that indicates that this dude has been way better than everybody else this season. I got no other way that I could play it. As good as Embiid has been, as good as Giannis has been, though Giannis hasn't. I think Giannis has been a clear step below those other two guys.
Really?
This year. Yeah, I don't think. Embiid's about to put up like 34 points a game and still be a vortex on defense. Like, I think he and Jokic are playing on a tier that's higher than everybody else is right now. And maybe the media decides that they want to give it to Embiid. I don't think it would be nearly as crazy now as I would have thought it was a month ago.
Well, here's the thing. I think this year, because you're a huge win shares guy, so am I. Yeah. His win shares, Jokic's, is top 10 in NBA history
all time
this season.
All time.
Yeah. Like there's like 2 Kareem seasons. There's maybe 2 LeBron seasons. There's 3 LeBron seasons, 3 Mike seasons, and maybe 1 more, and then there's Jokic.
Steph 2016 is
Steph
on
2016.
there. And I think there's 1 Wilt season.
Maybe Wilt was third.
Yeah,
I think the first 2.
But the key on that is all those seasons match up with seasons that you think of and remember as being memorably great. Like, it's not like some random smattering that winds up on that list. Jokic is on that list like 2 or 3 times, by the way, for whatever it's worth. Like, I do think this about Jokic for a lot of people. I don't know how much actual watching of the Nuggets that people are doing, because whenever people talk about this, like in the context of advanced stats, the dude's averaging a triple-double on 14-point-something shots a game. He's shooting 63% from 2 the last time I checked, and something like 38 from 3. The dude doesn't miss shots, and he out there like ornery with it, backing people down, daring you to do something about it, giving them all the up and unders and everything else. Like, this isn't, people aren't doing gymnastics to give props to him for how good he is. But after this is, to me, something that really LeBron and Jordan did in terms of the way that we talk about who an MVP is, who the best player in the league is, which is to give us the idea that has always been a two-way player.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not true. It has not always been a guy that can suffocate you on the other end, but you can appreciate the value of it. And that's the Embiid thing, right? Embiid be out there with one leg and it still shuts everything down by his mere presence.
Well, I will say this as a center, because I think you and I kind of both agree on the thing about the center, like the value of the center relative to all other positions. Most other MVPs that I can think of were two-way forces. If you were playing the 5 and you won MVP, you were stopping everything through some force, whether it was you were blocking the shots or you just were deterring people from going down the lane. Olajuwon, Robinson, Shaq wasn't necessarily the greatest defender, but you had to be aware.
The Jolly Green Giant, like
you wasn't going down there.
The only exception that I can think of is Mo Malone. Outside of that, I think you are correct. And I mean, I ain't got no Dave Cowens memory, but Dave Cowens got a couple of those. We can't give it to Kareem every year, MVPs. But yeah, you're right. Like, but also the nature of the center in basketball in that time, you kind of had to be that.
Right.
You know, like if you were going to have, like, the reason that you take Greg Oden over Kevin Durant was the value of the previous era of basketball for having somebody who could pull that off. You're right. It's very uncommon, the idea that the best center would not be a two-way player, or at the very least, or the best center, if he was a one-way player, the one would be the other way. See a Dwight Howard, Bill Russell, type of player. Olajuwon, for the early portion of his career, better defensive player than offensive player.
Well, here's the crazy thing, and I think I looked it up. I think Jimmy Butler, Bo, is the only player, I think he's second in win shares per 48. All the other players are bigs in the top 10.
Yeah, and you also, you got to be a little careful to weed out like the Mitchell Robinson type.
Yeah, exactly.
Them energy guys, them Nerlens Noel jokers that jump up there, like you could use your brain and whittle them out of the sample. But whenever people talked about the big man was fading, no, the big man that could only do big things, that was fading. But being bigger was always going to be better than being smaller. And so what happened was the game was going to evolve in such a way where the big man was now going to be able to do more things. Like the door slamming on the big man, as you thought of it previously, was Jahlil Okafor, who, to be perfectly honest, as good as he was in college with the ball, had Kevin Duckworth written all over him from the very beginning. Like, when you really stop and think about it, right? Like his whole steez was Kevin Duckworth's steez. He couldn't play in the national championship game, and they still won because Grayson Allen picked up the slack. That's all I'm saying, right? Like, it was all there. But you look at Jokic, for example. Jokic is 6'11", 285. Embiid is like 7'2", 280, 290. Like, these are, Karl Towns, he is a large man, right? Like these dudes are still out here. We were never gonna get to a point where the basketball, like you could be a center and be 6'9". No, not really, right? So like Cleveland, they got Evan Mobley, and that's cool because Jared Allen, as good as he is, the point was going to come where that tall man situation was still not going to work because the big man is always going to matter. He's just going to have to do more stuff.
Well, it's funny because I think the whole phasing the bigs out, I felt like the league kind of just moved a little too hastily. Removing the center from the All-Star ballot and removing the center from the All-NBA ballot. I hate to sound like an old man here. I like back to the basket play. I like seeing these big dudes go at it. Like, why do everything have to be 26 feet and out? Like, do I sound like an old young man or something like that here?
I have a hot take.
Uh-oh.
I am giving you this hot take on your show. I've been saving this, but now is the time to bring it up. I have the solution to bring back post play.
Take away the 3-point line?
Narrow the lane. They widened the lane because it just got to be too easy for people to park down low. Like you couldn't have Wilt Chamberlain, whose arms were long enough for him to dunk the ball without jumping from the old lane. George Mikan being right there, right? So gradually in steps, they had to widen it out, and it made perfect sense in a game where all the shots were twos. Well, now we need to find a way to encourage more play inside, to try to bring that part of the court back. So if you want to create a greater incentive for post play, move the post to where it is for college. Why not?
That's interesting.
How would that make the game worse?
It wouldn't. My thing always was, and Hubie Brown, who we both love, has said for years, he hasn't said it recently, but Hubie used to say, when the game was played back then, we played at 98 by 54. These dudes are a lot bigger and stronger. Why don't we make the court larger?
Yeah, and that's I've always been big on the court needing to be bigger, and they don't want to spend the money it would take to change these arenas up to do it. And my thing is, there's a very easy way for you to make the money back, which is just mark up the price of courtside seats. Like, you don't even have to price this all the way out. Like, the people that are willing to floss and flex in order to be there are willing to spend more money for courtside seats. But no, the reason to me that the court needs to be widened is specifically because of the existence of the corner three. Like the 3-point line needs to be moved out, but you can't move the 3-point line out anymore at this point because the corner three is already so close to the sideline that there's no room for it. You could, I would be fine with the court itself staying the same, but the existence or the idea that there's this one shot that is so much more valuable, it has such a higher expected value than every other shot on the floor, is just preposterous to me.
Yeah, and for me, every teams are setting up for that corner three. Like they're structuring their offenses, whether it's the weak side driving kick and someone is spotting up, like you can see, and that's not even a Golden State thing. That's a coaches being homogenous thing. They saw somebody do it, and all of a sudden, hey, we're going to incorporate that into our offense. Now, we're gonna break right here, but I'm going to ask Bo when we come back, because he brought up an interesting point. He said the name Kendrick Perkins. I'm going to ask him about not Kendrick Perkins, but about what Kendrick Perkins said. Bo, you mentioned the whole MVP discussion. You kind of glossed over it. Has the MVP, I think, put it like this, I think the MVP discussion has gotten toxic up until a certain point. Like when Perk brought up the Dirk and Steve Nash MVPs, for which I was not a voter because I was in college, but I completely agree with them winning MVPs. It seemed to have turned things into a much weirder space, because there is a certain conversation to be had. I just don't know if that was the particular conversation. It just felt like things have gotten toxic. And maybe that's Twitter, but it feels like the MVP talk as a whole has gotten toxic. Or has it always been this toxic?
No, it hasn't always been this toxic. What I think happened was there wasn't actually a discussion. And we needed a discussion. So we needed to find some stuff to talk about, because up until that point, really, there wasn't a discussion to be had here. And even if there was, people weren't really having it, right? Like, I don't even feel like we were truly in MVP discussion season, once we got there. But then once Perk says what he says, see, the thing that happens once that goes down is, man, TV producers salivate about that. And they be like, oh, man, let's get you out here to say this again. Oh, let's get the person up here to say this thing here with you. And then it went to a place that I don't want to belabor too much, but like I've talked about it where, I mean, if you were to ask me, I think both JJ and Perk would kind of like to have that day back. I don't think anybody acquitted themselves well in terms of expressing their position. But I was talking to my man David Dennis about this. I don't know if he's put this one on the road yet, but I'm going to say this and cite him so nobody thinks I came up with this. He made a very good point. He said he went back through to look at however many years, the last however many years, just to see how many white dudes have finished in the top 3 of MVP voting. And I forget all the names he came back with, which obviously were not that many. But the conclusion that you did ultimately reach is any white man that's ever been a legitimate MVP candidate has at least at some point won said MVP. Right? There ain't no Susan Lucci's for the white dudes in the MVP balloting. At some point, they wound up getting it. Now, what's funny about the Steve Nash one is, and so for people who heard us talk about win shares per 48, you can go look this up. In the last 20 years in particular, you want to go line up, find who the MVP is. You could basically go look at who won the win shares per 48 per 48 minutes statistic for those years, and you'll come up with the MVP. Not every single time, but just about every time. You'll get some shaky ones, though, and they're the ones that you remember being shaky. Derrick Rose in 2011, Russell Westbrook in 2017, right? Like, that's one that deviated from what we're used to.
Mm-hmm.
2 of those that deviate also are both the Steve Nash MVPs. By the way, one of those years where Steve Nash finishes well below Amari Stoudemire in that category, right? We have kind of undersold. Yeah, we've really kind of undersold that guy. But anyway, do you know who won the win shares per 48 statistic those 2 years that Steve Nash won the MVP?
No, I do not.
Dirk. The guy that got robbed was probably the white guy. By the way, the white guy who put that team on his back in 06, which is one of those Steve Nash years, and got them to the finals, and honestly, this close to winning it, because if they win game 3 in 06, that series is over. Yep. That was your MVP, but people, when they think about that season, that's when they jump up and talk about the Kobe scoring 35 points a game and everything else, But in reality, it was probably Dirk that got a job. Now, how does that fit in with this whole race story that we're kind of trying to get going here, but don't quite know what to do with? We just know it feels a little bit weird, the direction that it's gone in, and a few too many white people get way too offended when you say, hey, guys, there's an extended track record that makes us want to stop and raise some questions about what's going on. You got to be able to handle the question, right?
Yes.
I think Jokic is the MVP. I think the question is fair. Question, and you are not beyond being questioned.
No, and I think it's multiple things that work here, but like, one, if you think since the Twitter era, and by Twitter era, I mean post-decision, because I feel like that's when Twitter decided to blow up. The wide margins of votes has been crazy compared to eras before. There hasn't been like a crazy amount of close votes, but Jokic won by a crazy margin. Russ won by crazy margin. Steph's unanimous MVP. LeBron's near unanimous MVP. I feel like there's I don't know if it's bullying or groupthink or some standard of both, that because we're discussing this out loud, people are not, I won't say they're lacking the original thought, but they're feeling like if you don't vote for player X, you're stupid. And I feel like the coaches play into that too. Like Mike Malone. Brendan Malone's his dad. Michael Malone comes out and always says, if you don't vote for Nikola Jokic, like you're some uncouth brute or something like that. Like, no, like I can still come to the conclusion, but it's not that there's no other candidate. You know what I mean? And I feel like Twitter and all these other social media mechanisms, but not to make a long story long, that it bullies people into having groupthink.
Now, I think the phenomenon that you described precedes that, and I think you can look at it in another place, which is the Heisman Trophy. And as like you had Heisman watches every year and stock polls, and all that TV is influential, right? And so I can't right now myself tie it directly to like ESPN getting the rights to the Heisman. But if ESPN is the place that everybody's going to watch sports stuff and they doing a Heisman watch, and every year they're making the case and you see all these guys and it goes up and down or whatever, at some point, this is going to standardize itself. And you go look at the Heisman Trophy voting year after year after year, man, it gets to be in the 90s all the time, right? At least as far as my recollection. You can go look it up and it'd be wrong, but we haven't had that many compelling Heisman Trophy nights where you go in and be like, oh, this could go either way. No, because we've already talked it out so much in front of each other. And I think a very similar thing has happened with the MVP. Now, to be fair, the unanimous MVP, like the Steph Curry unanimous MVP, there was no other candidate. The year that LeBron should have been unanimous, but our man G. Wash decided to get cute. That was a unanimous type. Like that's on that list of top 10 win share per 48 seasons. Yep. We're talking about both of those are on that list. But I do think the more and more we're all having the same discussion. It's not so much, I don't think, about people worrying about getting bullied as much as we all eating off the same trough and we're all using the same information in order to make these decisions.
Now, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I have like just differing criteria for MVP because I didn't vote for Russ in 2017 because his team didn't win 50 games. Like 50 games is my margin. I think Jordan won it in 88.
You're going to have to change that, though, I think.
You think teams aren't winning 50 games anymore?
I think it's going to be, I think that with this level of parity that we're talking about, getting to 50 is going to be so hard, and you're going to have more teams up there that don't have MVP candidates.
I think, I tend to agree with you in theory, right? But I think the old guys are about to start aging out. Mm-hmm. In a way, because it's not that so much talent is coming in, it's that the old guys are sticking around longer. LeBron is almost 40. Chris Paul, even though he's, tailed off from that MVP discussion, those guys are staying longer, so it's filling away. Like we had this Ja Morant conversation a couple weeks ago. It ain't a whole lot of young guys that we can say like under 25 that are like, oh yeah, he's an MVP. We can't even say Zion Dan Williamson is an MVP. Even though when he plays, he looks like an MVP.
Right.
So I don't. I think 50 wins is a criteria for me because how valuable are you if your team ain't that good? Like I don't think 50 wins is a crazy number to hit. That's the reason. You know what I mean?
I agree with you there. I just don't know. Like, is it going to be like the 70s where Kareem was one of those MVPs without getting to 50 wins, right? Like, I don't know. And you go back and look at those years where you'd have like one or two teams per conference winning 50 games. Like, that was a different era before all this expansion. But like, I'm looking at the West right now. I am only positive one of those teams is going to win 50 games.
Yes, it'll be Denver. I think Sacramento and Memphis have an outside chance. They may have to go like 8-5 or something like that, right?
Yeah, they have to go. Both of them have to go 7-5 at the time of this recording for them to get to 50 wins, which is entirely possible, but certainly not guaranteed. The East, which by the way, I saw the number the other day about like the East record against the West, and the East been dog walking the West this year. But Milwaukee's at 50, Philly's at 48, Boston's at 49, Cleveland's at 45. I guess they'll all get to 50.
Right. Cleveland quietly highest net rating in the league.
Yeah, that's wild. And none of us trust them a lick.
None of us trust that they would even beat the Knicks in the first round of the playoffs. I think they will, but I think most people would think that the Knicks, the red hot New York Knicks, a phrase I have never been able to say as a national sports writer. Like most people would take the Knicks in that series for no other reason like name brand value. But yeah, it's a weird it's just a weird season all the way around. And that's why, to get back to my point, it's like, okay, your team has got to be valuable. Like that's the reason I couldn't ascribe to the Kobe thing, because this team won 45 games. I don't care who you playing with. Your team won 45 games and you're averaging 35 a night. Cool. Steve Nash's team won 62.
62.
And then the next year he was without Amari Stoudemire and won like 56. I know it's not a WWF championship belt, but I feel like in some ways it is. You gotta take it from my cold dead fingers.
No, there was something to that. There was. By the way, I'm sitting here looking at this. If you're the Sixers, you really don't want Miami in the first round.
I was just thinking that. I was just thinking that.
You really don't want that, do you?
They don't. Well, here's the thing. You're so dependent on James Harden.
Yeah. and that's when you get Super Saiyan. You kept Tobias Harris over me, Jimmy Butler. The most underrated great player of his time.
And here's the thing. Once again, second in win shares, right? He's had a better season than Kawhi and Paul George. All those dudes that people say, oh yeah, those are the premier swingmen at their position. And Jimmy's a level below that, except Jimmy Butler is like literally carrying the broken Miami Heat on his back. And had he put a little more leg into that 3-pointer in Game 7, I could have been in Miami instead of damn Boston.
And Boston, you know how mad I was. As having one of the most epic collapses of all time. Like, as sure as we are about Boston and everything else, I'm not.
We got to see what this coach looks like, Bo.
Yeah, but I mean, you know what I mean? But the coach that everybody acts like is Fog Allen, Red Auerbach, and John Wooden thrown into one. We saw them come apart repeatedly last postseason.
Well, it's the way that they're built. When you're dependent on Marcus Smart and then Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, not so much Tatum, because I feel like Tatum has a game that doesn't fluctuate as much. He has bad games, but he ain't throwing the ball all over the floor like Jaylen Brown was during the finals.
Yes.
Like they could have collapsed against Milwaukee. They damn near collapsed against Miami. And after Game 3 of that final series, Golden State said, we're the adults here.
Yes.
And that's pretty much what that series came down to. Boston, I firmly believe Boston was the better team, like on paper and talent and all that stuff.
Yeah, they didn't have Steph Curry.
Yeah, they didn't. They didn't have Steph Curry. But either way, we got Bomani Jones here. So, Bo, I don't know how to say this, like flowery and really nice things to say about you, but like as someone who I've paid attention to as a friend and a colleague and all this other stuff, man, I really, really do appreciate you coming on with us. And you don't have to say nothing nice back, because you won't say nothing nice back. But I do appreciate you joining us on my first episode, man.
No, man, I appreciate you having me. You did good work with it. You know what I'm saying? After you got through sounding like a bot. We just had to shake you off that program a little bit and everything worked out. No, man, I'm glad to be here. You've been making my podcast the right time better for so long. So it's an honor for me to come in here and return the favor. And just let me throw it out here right fast. Game Theory, Friday nights, 11 p.m. Eastern on HBO and HBO Max. You guys should check us out. We're having a good time over there.
Season 2. And I'm liking the wardrobe, too. A lot more colors.
Yeah, more colors. Yeah, we are giving you colors. It is colorful. You are
more and more colors. So, since Bo just teased my whole read thing, that's Bomani Jones. Of course, you're going to watch his shows, listen to his shows. I'm Vincent Goodwill. This is The Good Word. On Thursday, of course, no cap room. We got Jake and we got Dan on the Ball Don't Lie Network. So thanks again, y'all. We'll see you next week.